and say thank you for being here tonight. And I'd just like to say a few words about our presenter. Ken Chaya is an artist and urban naturalist based here in New York City. He's the designer of Central Park Entire, the illustrated map and app documenting the park's magnificent landscape and nearly 20,000 individual trees found there. During his career as an art director, Ken produced several richly illustrated titles on nature in North America. Ken currently teaches several nature courses at NYBG, or the New York Botanical Garden, where he assisted in the creation of the Urban Naturalist Certificate degree program. And there's several of us on this call that basically are about to finish that up. And I would say it's great, rigorous, and it's a fabulous program. Throughout the year, he leads nature walks in all 5 boroughs under the auspices of various organizations and provides lectures to various institutions. He's an active, excellent, fantastic birder and a section leader for the annual Central Park Christmas bird count for the Audubon. And Ken is the past president of the Linnaean Society of New York. So the Friends are so happy to have you here, Ken. So thank you and take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Alyssa and Steve. It's my pleasure to be here tonight, and I'm going to go right into my shared screen and get underway. I hope everyone can see that okay. Let's go to a slideshow format, and there we are. So once again, welcome one and all. Some of you I may have met before as students at NYBG, and I'm delighted to be with you again tonight. Tonight I'm going to talk about nature. Specifically, I'm going to talk about the wildlife that can be found in NYC, and I'm going to focus on birds and insects, because if I included trees and plants and wildflowers easily, we could be here until next week. And we only have an hour. And believe me, the birds and insects will take up that hour and keep us quite busy. But I will say this, that the care and the management of our trees, our parks, our urban green spaces is really now more important than ever, because without them, without the trees and plants and the habitats that they create, the birds that we enjoy and the insects that keep the birds well fed and the plants well pollinated simply would not be possible. So if we want to see beautiful neotropical migrant birds like this very lovely magnolia warbler, then we have to be sure that there are healthy trees and plants abundant with the food that will nourish them as they make their way as migrants through New York City to their breeding grounds and wintering grounds. According to a study done by J.P. Morgan Chase, as of April 2020, more than 86% of the American population now live in cities and metropolitan areas that are adjacent to major cities. So that's why the subways are so crowded these days. By 2050, it is estimated that 70% of the world's global population will live in cities. And you could bet that JP Morgan Chase will be happy to talk to all of them about competitive mortgage rates. When I consider the continued development and the future expansion of cities for human habitation, I have to wonder, how is that going to affect the wildlife that shares and cohabits the urban areas that so many of us call home? Will there be enough room and nectar and plants for this spicebush swallowtail butterfly that we see here nectaring on this plant? And will there be enough room and food and trees and plants to support all of the wildlife that migrates through New York City twice a year, such as this Tennessee warbler, as well as the other species that are here all year round? I am a Manhattan resident, and so I'm part of that national 86% that lives in a city. I live near Central Park, and although there are a great many wonderful urban parks and green spaces throughout the five boroughs to explore, there's something very special, very personal to me about Central Park. I've been exploring it for well over 30 years, and I still make new discoveries every single season there. And when you continue to return to a spot, a place in nature year after year, you begin to develop an understanding of it. You begin to notice thousands of little things that are many points of connection between certain species as they work together to contribute to a balanced ecosystem, even here in the middle of New York. So I'd like to share with you tonight some of those points of connection that I've observed while studying wildlife in New York City with a camera. Here's a yellow-bellied sapsucker. It is a male because it has a red throat. Females have a white throat. You can even see some of the yellow on the belly right there, if you could see my cursor. This bird is perched on a sugar maple. That's the same tree that gives us maple syrup, and that is the key reason why sapsuckers love them so much. The sap is exceptionally sweet, and if you know of a sugar maple in New York City, go have a close look at the bark. And I'll bet you somewhere on that trunk, I bet that you will see rows, lines, horizontal lines of the telltale holes of a yellow-bellied sapsucker. Sapsuckers know how to find sugar maples in our city. It's one of those points of connection between two species that have co-evolved together in the same habitat. The wide variety of fruit that native trees produce supports many forms of our local wildlife. The most abundant, important native tree in New York City, in my opinion, is the black cherry. And in Central Park, very few of the black cherries there were planted by the Parks Department or the Central Park Conservancy. Almost all of them were planted by birds. Birds like this robin. Robins love black cherries. They swallow the cherry whole, digest the fruit, and in a little while expel the seed with some fertilizer on it. Presto, in a few years, we have black cherries everywhere. Again, the bird and the fruit, another urban wildlife connection. Hummingbirds enjoy the nectar of jewelweed, and the jewelweed flowers are lovely orange colored trumpet-shaped flowers, which are ideal and the perfect fit for the long bill of a hummingbird to reach in and for the tongue to probe and drink up that nectar. This can be said as another example of two co-evolved species from different groups, another point of connection in our urban jungle. And if you look at this photograph I took, you can actually see pollen on the bill of that hummingbird, white pollen. So this bird is not only feeding, it's also pollinating like many of our insects do. When the lovely, beautiful flowers of our native tulip trees bloom, which they're doing right now, their scent and their nectar attract a huge number of insect pollinators, as well as migrants like this lovely scarlet tanager. I've observed tanagers and a number of warblers up high, way up high in the canopy of tulip trees, eating the pollen and the nectar of these flowers. And when an insect comes by and lands a little bit too close to that bird, the bird snaps that up too. Some sugar, some protein, a perfect balanced diet, all courtesy of the tulip tree. Now, of course, in New York, the variety of dining experiences is second to none, especially for those diners who are adventurous. In other words, the scavengers. For them, we have pizza crust, fried chicken, a variety of leftover snackables, and of course, bagels. This is New York, by the way. Now, all the birds I just showed you in the last 4 slides, starlings, house sparrows, and feral rock doves, are all non-native species. They were brought here years ago and have survived quite nicely, many of them adapting to coexist with us and the many available forms of food that we throw around in our urban environment. In the fall and into the winter, fruit can still be found in the form of crab apples and haws, the small fruits of hawthorn trees, and hackberries. Many wild birds depend on these food sources to get them through the winter. Here's a yellow-bellied sapsucker eating the haws off of a hawthorn tree. Now, so far, I've highlighted a number of plant and animal associations found in New York City. But for the predators who are more of on a protein diet, there's no shortage of feral rock doves in this city either. And I found this beautiful mature Cooper's hawk plucking the feathers off of this unfortunate feral rock dove prior to eating it. This was in Central Park. By the way, all of the photos in this were taken by me, except one, which I'll point out, and all of them were taken in New York City, except one, which I'll also point out when we get there. And there are good numbers of squirrels if the hawks are quick enough to catch them in this city. During the spring, there are also termites that emerge in great numbers, fresh out of dead logs. I saw a couple of termite emerges just this week in Central Park. It was warm enough for that. And of course, there are worms and loads of other invertebrates easily available just beneath the soil and underneath the leaf litter in our parks and green spaces. There's opportunity for fresh fish. This black-crowned night heron was hunting motionless at the pool in Central Park. The turtles didn't seem to mind. And here's a immature black-crowned night heron that I photographed eating a blue crab at the Gowanus Canal. About 2 years ago, I was involved in a bio blitz there. And I have to say, I was quite surprised at the amount of wildlife. The Gowanus is still one of the most polluted areas in New York City, maybe in all of the state. It was designated a Superfund site by the EPA, and environmental cleanups began there in 2013, but there's still a long, long way to go. But what's very interesting is we're starting to see wildlife return to the Gowanus. And I would be remiss if I talked about urban predator food chains without mentioning one of the top items on the menu, rats. These are the remains of a rat in the form of an owl pellet in this photograph. A pellet is a mass of undigested fur, bones, and other material that raptors, particularly owls, cough up and spit out after eating a big meal. I have dissected a number of owl pellets found in New York City, and I've discovered feathers, fur, lots of pieces of bones that belong to both birds and rodents, and many of them were included rats. I'm always really happy to see a raptor eating a pigeon rather than a rat, because a good number of our popular local raptors have met their fate due to ingesting poison rats. This female barred owl, affectionately known as Barry, was a favorite of many, many Central Park birders and members of the public back in 2021. Tragically, she was struck by a vehicle one night in Central Park and killed. And it turned out that she had a very high level of toxic rodenticide in her tissues due to consuming poisoned rats. The problem is the rats ingest the poison and they don't die immediately. They walk around for a day or two, becoming sicker and weaker and eventually expire. It's at that time when it's very easy for birds of prey like raptors, hawks, uh, to find these creatures and eat them and bring them back to the nest as well for their young. So the city can be a really unsafe place for predators, for predator birds. There is currently a bill being put forwarded by City Council to ban rodenticides in New York City and instead opt for a chemical use that will neuter the rats, making them incapable of reproduction. This is a much more environmentally conscious method of controlling the rat population, and we should all act to support this bill. New York City can be a really great place to live if you are a birder. There are an amazing number of parks and green spaces that are easily accessible by public transportation, and many of them provide distinct, unique habitats for birds. And New York City itself is situated directly out below the Atlantic Flyway. It's one of the major migratory flight routes. Millions upon millions of birds pass by or over New York City every year, heading to their breeding grounds in the spring and returning to their wintering grounds in the tropics, where they spend the winter. Many of them stop by our city to rest and refuel on their long journey. Twice a year, we are visited by some of the most beautiful neotropical migrants that breed in the Northern Hemisphere, like this black-throated green warbler, or this male black-throated blue warbler, or this female orchard oriole, or this cedar waxwing. Isn't that a lovely bird? Or how about this? A mega rare New York City migrant in January of 2021, a snowy owl appeared on a baseball field in Central Park. Here it is at night, perched on the baseball field backstop in the North Meadow ball fields. There has only been one other report, validated report of a snowy owl in Central Park before this, and that was recorded 130 years ago. Often difficult to find, the elusive and beautiful prothonotary warbler is what we are looking at in this photograph. And like many migrants, the prothonotary feeds on caterpillars and other invertebrates that it finds hidden in the bark of trees and under the leaves and twigs. It's such a beautiful bird that there's an old adage among Central Park birders, and it goes like this: if you're being mugged in the park in the spring, don't call for the police. Yell or text prothonotary warbler. You'll be immediately surrounded by 10 or 12 birders in no time at all. So for some of the migratory birds who have wintered in the tropics, New York City is their breeding ground. Many of them go much further, up into the maritime provinces of Canada, Massachusetts, Vermont, Maine, upstate New York. But for a lot of them, New York City and Central Park is where their breeding ground is. Let's take a look at some of the birds that do nest and breed in the city. One that everyone will recognize is right here, the American robin. Robins can have up to 3 broods each season. They build nests in lower limbs of trees using a combination of mud and soft vegetation. And even with all those magnificent trees in Central Park, I found this mother robin building a nest in a traffic light. But who am I to judge? The nest was successful. About 35 species of birds have been known to nest just in Central Park alone. Many, many more species of birds nest across the 5 boroughs of New York City. This is a downy woodpecker that I found excavating a nest hole in the north woods of Central Park. Here is a red-bellied woodpecker at a nest site. Woodpeckers, by the way, are cavity nesters. They use that strong bill and the skull design and the neck muscles to hammer into trees where the heartwood has been rotted away. And they use those internal cavities of the trees for their nests. During the spring, I managed to find bird nests in some amazing places throughout the city. Kestrels are also not cavity nesters, and they will often nest in the broken, hollow cornices of buildings, like we see here. This nest was discovered in Harlem a few years ago. The young kestrel peeking out was being coaxed to fledge from the nest hole by its mother, who was perched directly across the street and was calling to it. As I watched, this young nestling became a fledgling. It leapt from the hole, fluttered down to the fire escape below, where the parent immediately brought it some food as a reward. It was a wonderful experience. In Central Park, this warbling vireo nest was discovered up high in a London plane tree, and as I watched, I could hear the female softly singing. This is one of the few birds who will sing while on the nest. You could see her bill on the left and tail on the right there. As their name implies, house sparrows are happy to nest on houses and other human-made structures, even Dunkin' Donuts signs. They're messy nest builders, often stuffing grass and other soft vegetation haphazardly into tight spaces until it spills over the side. Here's a male house sparrow bringing nest material to its nest under the eave of the Dana Discovery Center in Central Park. Both sexes of this species work to construct and maintain the nest. Here's a female red-winged blackbird tending to her nest of woven grasses in the cattail reeds at the Harlem Mirror. The female entered the nest while I was watching and hunkered down almost completely out of sight. And if you look closely, you could see the eye right there peering at me between the blades of grass. She was keeping an eye on me. She wasn't entirely happy to see me and that I found her nest, by the way. And neither was the male. He came in shrieking and cussed me out pretty badly until I moved on. When I discover a active nest that I want to photograph, I try to be extremely conscious of not alarming the parents as best I can. I take the photo and then I move on. Here's a Canada goose nest. This is perched on the walled area of the reservoir in Central Park. The Gatorade bottle is an optional nest element with this species. Here's a barn swallow nest. The barn swallow nest is a shallow cup of mud and saliva mixed with soft vegetation like lichens that they glue right to a substrate, a vertical substrate, like the wall, in this case, the wall of the North Gatehouse on the Central Park Reservoir. And notice that it's placed directly under an overhanging ledge to protect it from the rain. In the summer, after the young barn swallows have fledged, they can be seen sitting on the railing of the North Gatehouse. And although they're as big as the parents at this time, they're not quite capable of catching their own food yet. So they still have to be fed by both parents. Here's one fledgling being fed by one of the parents while its siblings look on with what appears to be much consternation. They look like they're saying, "Hey, what about us down here? Don't forget us, Mom." In the spring, one spring, I should say, I found cardinals nesting very, very low in a yew shrub in the Shakespeare Garden of Central Park. And she doesn't look too happy to see me either, by the way. Because this wasn't a very poor location that is low and directly exposed to a lot of public traffic, this bird ultimately packed up and abandoned this nest site for another one. And I'm glad she did that. In a low branch overhanging a path uh, near the pool, I found this, another cardinal nest. And in this one, we see the male, the father in charge of feeding the young. Male cardinals, by the way, make very good partners and very good parents. Blue jays tend to nest up high in the forked limbs of big trees, often oaks and elms, that provide good cover for those nests. And for that reason, finding a blue jay nest can be challenging. Uh, their nests appear very twiggy from the outside and are composed of bark, mosses, twigs, and various leaves. Hidden behind the sweet gum leaves in this photograph is the woven nest of a Baltimore Oriole. You can just see the bird. There's her bill. Here's her tail. You can just see her behind the leaves. Orioles are weavers. They weave basket-like nests that hang suspended from the branches above. There's a small opening in the top where the female squeezes in to incubate her eggs. Here's another photo of a Baltimore Oriole nest in progress that I found last spring in Central Park. You could see the tail of the female here on the right side. Notice that there's a red string added to the woven grasses and plant fibers. Besides being excellent weavers, orioles are talented home decorators.
Huh.
And here's a crowded nest of a European starling with several hungry young peeking out of the cavity of a London plane tree. And here's Central Park's past celebrity bird of the avian world sitting on its nest on the top of a window ledge on Fifth Avenue, none other than the famous pale male. This nest on Fifth Avenue facing the park was occupied from 2002 to 2023 and successful for many consecutive seasons. For a number of years, a red-tailed pair used this statue on the Cathedral of St. John the Divine as their nest site. The nest was successful, and as a result, they returned each year to refurbish it. But when they started construction on a massive building right next door, I expected that this pair would abandon the nest site, and they did, heading over to the Columbia University campus. However, this spring, there's a raven pair nesting on the same shoulders of the same statue. This happens to be St. Andrew. And for the first time, ravens are nesting in my neighborhood. I've never seen a raven nest in my neighborhood or anywhere in New York City for that matter, but I understand there are nests on roofs that are not able to be viewed along the Brooklyn waterfront areas. But here's an active nest, and this photo, taken by my friend and fellow birder, Karen Fung, who is a terrific photographer, captured the young begging to be fed right at the rim of the nest. Isn't that a great image? This, by the way, was taken only 2 days ago.
Huh.
Thanks, Karen. It takes a lot of skill and perhaps some luck for a raptor to successfully breed in New York City. While birding in the north end of Central Park in 2019, I spotted a large hawk high in a tall oak tree. As I approached, another hawk came in and landed right next to it with a twig in its mouth. It was a young male bird, and he seemed to be trying to impress this mature red-tailed female and convince her that he was a proper suitor. The male hawk then flew just across Fifth Avenue with the twig and landed on a ledge of the Cardinal Cook Hospital. He seemed to be saying to the female, "Come on, check it out. I got a great setup over here. Fifth Avenue, fresh twigs, a high floor, great view of the park, the whole deal." And he succeeded, while I'm watching all of this, in arousing the female's attention. She flew out of the park across Fifth Avenue and joined him to inspect the nest site. She didn't find it all that impressive. In fact, as I watched, she took a twig and flew to the building across the street and began to arrange that there with some other twigs. And perhaps this was her way of saying, "Not this year, Junior." Back at the original nest site, our young male appears to be thinking, "I don't know. I use big twigs. I use small twigs. I even put some fresh pine needles here. What does she expect from me? What's she looking for?" Well, maybe next spring, fella. Many, many hawks are unsuccessful in their first attempt to mate and nest. It takes time and practice and skill and experience, along with a number of other fortunate circumstances to breed successfully in this city. Coincidentally, this very same ledge hosted a successful red-tailed hawk nest the very next spring. Was it the same pair? I don't know. But I'd like to think that a little persistence paid off for our young red tail. Way back in 2016, I documented 17 active red-tailed hawk nests just on the island of Manhattan alone. And that's only the ones that I knew about. This is a species that was gravely endangered back in the 1970s due to DDT poisoning. Nesting in New York City is tough for raptors. Besides all the urban dangers, such as vehicles and pollution and poison, there's competition for a nest site and competition for territory and attacks from predators such as crows and other raptors. Here's another red-tailed nest that I found in Central Park's very busy and very popular Sheep Meadow, of all places. This pair of red tails moved into the park in 2014 and successfully nested there for 2 seasons back to back. This photo was taken during their second season on May 22nd of 2015. Now, I want you to look at those baby hawks, which are known as eases. I want you to look at them closely. Notice their size. They're just little white fur balls, basically, with sharp beaks at this point. And this is May 22, 2015. Here's what they look like 19 days later. Wow. Look at the size. They're basically doubled in a little over 2.5 weeks. Baby birds must grow really fast in order to survive. They only have a short summer season to fledge, learn how to fly, learn how to hunt, and then migrate. So everything has to be very accelerated for their development. Here's a video that I took on the same day of these young hawks getting ready to fledge. Take a look at this. There were two young hawks in that nest, and we were looking at one just doing what hawks do as just as they're ready to leave the nest. They stand up, they flap their wings, they get all set, and then they settle back down. And they get up and do it again and settle back down. I was there for hours that day, expecting to see their first flight, but it was not to be. They fledged the very next day. And by the way, if I had the sense to pull back even further from this tree, you would see that there were two people picnicking right underneath it on a blanket, completely oblivious to this incredible drama going on right above them. So this is the Mertz Library at the New York Botanical Garden, where I teach my classes on birds, insects, and water ecology. This photo was taken the very first year I began teaching there in 2017. And if we zoom in to the top of the roof peak on the right side, let's do that. You can see the top of this great horned owl that was nesting on the ledge of the building, on the facade. This species commonly nests in tree cavities, not on buildings, but in 2017, this pair did.
Ah,
The great horned owl pair produced two young. Here's one of them. This bird's about 3 to 4 weeks old. Nearly, well, it's as big as the adult mother. Where is the other one, you ask? Well, the other one tumbled down out of the nest ledge to the ledge below. Can you see it here on the right side? Here's baby owl number one. Here's baby owl number two, safely right next to mother. But this bird fell out of the nest, and here he is. He was walking around the ledge looking in windows. This young owl remained stranded on the ledge below the nest all day long, and an unprotected baby owl on an open ledge like that, not a good combination for survival. I was really worried about this fellow. And I know that I'm anthropomorphizing right now like crazy, but just look at that face. Doesn't this owl look like a rascal? I mean, doesn't he look like trouble? Of course, this would be the one to tumble out of the nest, the mischievous one, and end up, on the ledge below. The very next day, this baby owl was gone. My fear was that left alone and unprotected on that ledge, the young baby owl had probably become prey of the local redtails that also nest at NYBG. So it was a sad day in class. But wait, surprise! 2 days later, I find this young owl in a nearby pine tree. The other owlet is still on the nest with mama, but this adventurous explorer has somehow managed, I don't know how, to flap or glide or climb down and then climb up this pine tree right next to the library. So it was already off and exploring the world. And here it is, just a few days later. Wow, look at how that plumage is coming in. Isn't that amazing? This is just a few days, and it still has a lot of the baby downy feathers. It looks like a rather fuzzy, unkempt adult at this stage. So here we are with a happy ending, and I've shown you a whole selection of species that nest in New York City: downy woodpecker, kestrel, warbling vireo, house sparrow, American robin, red-winged blackbird, Canada goose, barn swallow, northern cardinal, blue jay, Baltimore oriole, red-tailed hawk, great horned owl, and raven. There will be a quiz, so pay attention. Now I want to move on and introduce you to our six-legged neighbors that live and share New York City with us. The insects. This is an eastern tail blue butterfly, a really tiny and beautiful butterfly. It's just about the size of your thumbnail, and there it is on my thumb. Now, in our culture, we domesticate some mammals and birds, and we anthropomorphize many others in our myths and our stories. We celebrate the cute ones in our media and our entertainment venues. It's all really charming. But insects, on the other hand, have a hardened body, six legs, bulging compound eyes, and antennae. They're more like aliens from another planet than fellow Earthlings. Many of them are small and insignificant to us. We swat them or step on them without even giving it a second thought. So, how can one possibly be interested or even care about something that's almost too small to even be seen? This, by the way, is a robber fly. Look at those eyes. Insects, all true insects, are hexapods with six jointed limbs and three distinct body parts, head, thorax, and abdomen. This metallic green sweat bee is an insect. Here's the cheat sheet for what makes an insect an insect. Insects are invertebrates. They do not have a backbone. Instead, they have an exoskeleton, six jointed limbs, they're hexapods, and three distinct body parts. They also have external mouth parts, antennae, and usually fully developed compound eyes. They also have feet made out of separate segments called tarsomeres, and in the case of females, an ovipositor. The images here, the lower image is of a ichneumon wasp, of which there are over 3,300 species of ichneumon wasps known just north of Mexico. It's a huge, huge group. This one's a female, as you can tell by her extended ovipositor. In this case, the ovipositor does not function as a stinger. Instead, it is used for depositing eggs, sometimes into a living host like a caterpillar, sometimes into the nest of another species. It may be required to drill through wood to reach the nest of that species. Some wasps do possess an ovipositor that also functions as a stinger, but these are hidden inside the wasp. The stingers of wasps and bees and ants are retractable and they're kept inside the body. You do not see them until it's too late. Also shown in this image is a question mark butterfly. Humans have a disproportionate fear of insects. We often think of them only in terms of their negative qualities. They sting, they bite, they infest our crops, they carry disease, they interrupt our picnics, they chew holes in our homes. All true. But none of that is malicious behavior, it's survival. Nature doesn't recognize ownership. It doesn't recognize your house. It's all about habitat and survival. And if you're very gentle, you can sometimes get dragonflies like this female blue dasher to perch right on your hand. But did you know that of all the insects on the planet, it's only about 1 or 2% that are considered true pests and problems? The majority, the 98, 99% of all the others are extremely beneficial as pollinators and as an important food source for millions and millions of other living creatures, especially birds. Many of them also keep the problem insect populations like mosquitoes and aphids from exploding. This is another robber fly that we see in this image perched on my thumb. So we should all just try and relax and enjoy the insects. I promise you, if you give them a chance, even a little one, they will win you over. They'll fascinate you. Insects, for instance, were the very first creatures on Earth to develop complex social systems and the very first to fly. Insect flight occurred millions of years before the first dinosaurs appeared. Relevance. Why is that important? Well, flight made diversification possible by expanding the insect's range and by promoting the use of thermoregulation. Heat is generated by an insect's flight muscles during a pre-flight warm-up. During a pre-flight warm-up, insects shiver to warm their flight muscles. Shivering is a form of thermoregulation. You do it, I do it, insects do it as well. Generating heat in order to warm up their muscles to fly allowed species to gradually adapt to cooler and cooler climates. They moved from hot, swampy areas to basically can be found everywhere today on the globe. So the thermoregulation and flight together allowed them to expand their range and their habitats. Speaking of expanding their range, here is the monarch butterfly, popular favorite, an insect that makes an annual migration every fall, thousands and thousands of miles from our area to its wintering grounds in Michoacan, Mexico, up high on a high mountaintop. When you see the fourth generation of monarchs in September and October, these are the monarchs that these are the individuals that will make their way on this migratory journey all the way to Mexico. Adult monarchs feed on a whole variety of different plants and their nectar, but it's the young monarchs that require a specific plant, milkweed, in order to grow. Milkweed is a vital host plant for young monarchs. Females only lay their eggs on milkweed. The flowers of many urban plants provide nectar and pollen to insects and their young, and in return, the insects assist in spreading plant pollen from one flower and one tree to another, thereby ensuring cross-fertilization in many species, which is what we want. Here is a eastern carpenter bee feasting on the nectar and the flowers of a redbud, which is a beautiful native tree, by the way. Here's another eastern carpenter bee feasting on the nectar of a horseman plant, Monarda punctata. And in doing so, it's also transferring pollen from its body from one flower to another. You can see a lot of pollen grains on the wings there. Look at that. And if you look at those mandibles, wow, now you understand how a carpenter bee can actually dig and chew into solid wood. So here's a photo that's eluded me for many, many years. There's a spring flower that blooms early every year in March. It's called the Siberian squill. Beautiful blue flower with blue pollen. And when this emerges, when this blooms in March, the honeybees go crazy for the pollen and nectar. And every spring I see honeybees collecting blue pollen on their legs, it looks like little blue handbags, on their pollen baskets, which are the corbiculae. The corbicula are the hairs and the bristles that are on the hind legs that are there to gather pollen. So every spring I see these bees with these little blue handbags and I try to photograph them. And for years I was unsuccessful. Finally, I got this. After many failed attempts, I've got the bee. I've got the flower, I've got the pollen basket, and I've got the blue pollen. Here we see the orange pollen basket of a very unlucky digger bee. Unlucky because it happened to land on the wrong flower this day. That would be the flower where this jagged ambush bug, great name, was hidden, a predaceous insect waiting for prey to enter close enough for it to leap forward, grab it with its pincer-like forelegs, and then insert its sharp beak into the body and feed on the prey of this digger bee. Let's look at some more predatory insects. This is a Astata genus. It's a group of solitary wasps that live underground, and they prey exclusively on green stink bugs. I found several burrows of these in one area of Central Park. While I watched, the female wasps would return every couple of minutes with a bright green paralyzed stink bug. They landed and they'd scurry really quickly right into the nest hole. Sometimes, if they saw me malingering a little too close to that nest hole with my camera, they would refuse to go into the nest. They just landed and looked at me. They waited for me to move back. They didn't want to give the location away. It's really a very interesting experience. Here's another predator. This is a wasp known as a bee wolf. Bee wolves are gregarious. They excavate burrows underground in communities, and they take as prey other stinging insects, smaller bees and wasps, and feed them to their young. I watched as this bee wolf landed with her prey. She brushed aside an invisible door of gravel to reveal a hidden chamber behind it. And in she went. She emerged a little while later, replaced this gravel door in like 2 seconds, and flew off. It was amazing. You know, secret chambers with invisible doors. It's all true, all happening out there around us. And when you find something like this, like right in your neighborhood park, you really begin to wonder, wow, what else am I missing? What else is going on out here? Watching insects is like entering a hidden world or a whole new dimension. As I watched this community of bee wolf nests on a dry hillside in Central Park, I noticed some bee wolves sharing burrows. One would go in, two would come out. They have a community door and separate chambers. It's just like the apartment building that I live in. This may serve for increased protection from parasitic wasps, like the ichneumon wasp, that would love to find this nest, crawl in, and lay its eggs. And although bee wolves themselves are predators, they must be on the constant lookout for parasitic wasps, which will attempt to enter and parasitize their nest. This one had just brought a live insect in and emerged, leaving another one to guard the hole. If there's no guards to remain behind, they'll block up the entrance with the plug of dirt that I described earlier, and then leave to hunt. Here's another predator wasp that hunts prey to feed its young. It's called the cicada killer wasp.
Oh,
And although it's large and looks frightening, it's harmless unless you're a cicada. In that case, it will sting you, paralyze you, and bring you as live prey to be consumed by its young. Everything must eat. This one was photographed on my friend Mike's hand. Mike and I do a lot of insect hunting together. He's an expert amateur entomologist. And this this cicada killer wasp could not sting Mike if it wanted to because it's a male. It doesn't have a stinger. Females only have stingers. They do all the hunting while the males take the day off. Here's the female cicada killer wasp with prey. It's hanging onto Mike's leg. Sometimes I use Mike as my studio assistant. He doesn't mind very much. Now, cicadas, when they're paralyzed, are heavy, especially after they've been stung and the female is dragging this heavy burden around, trying to get back to her nest hole. And that dead weight often prevents her from taking off. She needs the help of a little altitude for repeated takeoffs. And there may be many takeoffs to reach her nest from the area that she found the cicada in. So what she does is interesting. She'll climb a tree or a fence, holding on to the cicada, or even a person's leg, like Mike's. And when she gets high enough, she'll launch herself off with her package and fly as hard as she could toward her nest. And that's exactly what this one did. It kept climbing up Mike's leg and then up his arm and all the way to his shoulder, where she was finally cleared for takeoff. And we watched her fly off and then chased her down. And she came down a few feet from her nest and she crawled the rest of the way, dragging her prey along. Female cicada killer wasps have a lot of work to do each summer. They dig the burrow, they lay the eggs, and then they must provision that nest with several cicadas. Last summer, I was leading a walk in Central Park when I spotted a cicada killer wasp dragging a cicada across the path. I put my foot out, and it did just what I expected it to do. It started climbing me, climbed all the way up my leg, up my foot, onto my shirt, onto my neck, all the way up to my back and shoulders. It climbed across my ear. The sound was amazing, all the way to my head. And from there, it took off and flew toward its nest. Here's a short video I recorded on my cell phone of a female cicada killer wasp digging a nest. Let's watch it. Here she comes. Get ready. And back in she goes. This was filmed along the third baseline of a ballpark right in Central Park. And I love how she looks like a little puppy, a little dog kicking and pushing the debris out of her way. Oh, we saw that already. Okay, moving along. Here is a unique, if not somewhat gruesome form of nesting. This is an ichneumon wasp again. It appears to be stinging this caterpillar, but what's happening is she is actually laying eggs inside it. The eggs will hatch. It will begin to feed on the caterpillar, ultimately killing it. Later, the larvae will bore through the skin of the caterpillar and pupate right there. Most ichneumon wasps are parasites. They're parasitic rather. They inject their eggs directly into living hosts or the hosts or the host nests. Ichneumons are considered actually valuable for the role they play in regulating the insect populations. Another group of wasps, the mud daubers, use mud to construct their nests. They slurp up mud, roll it into a ball, and mix it with their saliva to create the right consistency for their nests. And like sculptors, other wasps spread mud expertly in these little coils. This is the nest of a different mud dauber type wasp. It's called an organ pipe mud dauber. And I found this nest on the grounds at the New York Botanical Garden. Insects are one of nature's most talented and amazing architects. This is the nest of a bald-faced hornet. It depends on trees for its nest material because it's constructed of layers and layers of chewed, masticated wood that have been glued together in fine strips. The entrance is on the bottom. prevents rain from entering. There are several horizontal layers inside of brood cells that hang upside down like umbrellas. Here's a bald-faced hornet chewing wood from a rustic bridge in Central Park. If you look close, you could see there's a gray ball of chewed wood mixed with its saliva right behind the mandibles. And you could see here where it actually wet the wood in order to soften it and peel it up and chew it. Now, you never ever want to mess with a hornet's nest. They're very devoted parents, and they will sting you repeatedly. But otherwise, I find them to be very gentle and accommodating. And on some cool mornings, they may even be willing to crawl up on your finger to absorb your body warmth, which is happening here. Many insects build nests in human-made structures. In Fort Tryon Park, I found this feral honeybee colony, inside of a lamppost. Here's another lamppost being used by European paper wasps for their nest. So in the summer, be careful about leaning on lampposts. Take a good look at them beforehand. Here, this is a Nuatheca. This is an egg case of a praying mantis. In late summer, the female ejects a foamy mass that contains her eggs. It quickly hardens, and inside, those eggs will overwinter and emerge later in the spring. This was found on the stalk of dry vegetation in the native plant garden at NYBG. Galls are another distinct type of nest chamber. These are goldenrod galls. They're formed when a goldenrod fly lays an egg inside the stalk. Now, galls are interesting. They're actually built by the plant, not the insect. Once the plant is invaded by the insect and its eggs are laid within its tissues, chemical changes cause the plant to form a thick tumor-like gall around that egg. And inside, the hatched egg uses the plant tissue and its resources to feed on as it grows throughout the summer and fall. It'll eventually pupate inside over the winter. And before it pupates, however, it does something very smart. It chews a hole almost all the way through the gall to the outside, so that when the adult fly emerges and it doesn't have a chewing mouth part, all it has to do is simply push through the wall of the weakened gall to enter the world. That's upfront planning. This is a gall I found on witch hazel. Its design looks very similar to a witch hazel seed pod, but it's actually caused by an insect called the spiny witch hazel aphid. The overwintering aphid eggs are laid in June and July on witch hazel, and then the galls form around them. The eggs hatch inside the gall, and the new aphid nymphs crawl to the flower bud when they emerge to feed. This is a photo of an open gall, and inside you could see winged adults there, as well as these young red nymphs, as well as this chalky, gelatinous egg mass inside. Now, I want to emphasize the difference between galls and cocoons. Galls are caused by a chemical reaction within the plant as a result of an insect laying an egg. A cocoon is made by a single larva, either out of silk it manufactures combined with organic material, vegetation, or a hardening of the cuticle, which forms the cocoon itself, in which it pupates. And later it'll emerge as a winged adult in a process we call complete metamorphosis. This is a cocoon we're looking at. There's a moth in Central Park that creates a lovely little white cocoon and surrounds it with a tiny hair-like fence. Here's one I found on one of the ornate street lamps in the park. Look at it closely. Isn't this fabulous? Here's the pupal case of the rib cocoon maker moth, surrounded by a self-made fence. It's not clear what that fence actually does. It's believed that it serves as a form of protection for the pupa possibly from ants and other predators. I just think it's wonderful. Here's another praying mantis egg case. What do we call it? It's a Uatheca. Sometimes I find these in the winter, and I if I know that they're going to be removed by groundspeople, I might take them home with me. And this one I took home. I put it in a tight-fitting jar, and look what happened. So here's the Ootheca. I kept at home for 3 months, and now young mantids are emerging. There can be anywhere from 30 to 40 to 100 in a single Ootheca. This hatch out happened on April 25th. Immediately after they emerge, I have to release the young back to nature. You have to do it quickly because they're hungry and they begin to eat each other. My wife, by the way, isn't very happy about any of this. Joan's a wonderful person, but we differ on our appreciation for insects. She also has no interest in insects hatching and devouring each other in our living room. But, I've been bringing things home my whole life, and it's just part of who I am and what I do. Here's the baby mantid. Isn't this great? Look at this lovely creature. It's the miniature version of the adult. They're not yet capable of flight, but very soon they will be. This is an example of what we call gradual metamorphosis. And by the end of the summer, this is what a full-grown Asian mantis looks like. One morning in March, I discovered this hanging on a shrub in Central Park. I was thrilled because I have never found a giant silk moth cocoon like this before. I remembered the precise spot and returned many times to check on it. Here it is 2 months later on May 1st, 2018. And for 2 months, I've been watching it like a hawk. Every time I went to the park, I looked at it just to make sure, check on it, make sure everything's okay. 2 days later, I came back and it was gone. And at the base of that shrub were several beer bottles, an empty bag of potato chips, and other garbage. And I was shocked and angry. Then I began to look on the ground. And guess what I found? When I picked it up, it vibrated in my hand with internal movement. I took that as a sign and I brought it home with me. So I took this cocoon home. I set it up suitably in a terrarium with branches, leaves, water. On May 1st, 2018, a month goes by. And now when I'm carefully picking it up, it's no longer vibrating. There's no movement inside. I begin to have doubts about its success. Then, on the morning of June 12th, I go to check on the cocoon. This is what I find. The cheesecloth that I clamped to the terrarium was pushed aside at one end, and inside the terrarium is an open cocoon. It's alive. Not only is it alive, I realize, but it's loose somewhere in my apartment. I have to find it before my wife wakes up. My wife is a wonderful person, by the way, but she's not a naturalist. She has very little interest in the things I bring home. But the idea of an escaped 6-inch hairy red moth flying around our living room, well, that's just not going to go well at the good ship Chaya. So I begin to search for this huge moth, and I can't find it. It can't have gone too far. I look everywhere, but I can't find the thing. So I'm starting to worry. And then my wife gets up and tells me she's working from home today. Now I'm sweating. The whole day goes by with me frantically searching every time she leaves the room. And on the day of June 12th, it ends with a mystery and a secret, but no moth. June 13th, I wake up and there it is. A magnificent, breathtaking Polyphemus moth sitting on my Dracena plant. It's been a long, long night, but there she is. Now, how do I know it's a she? Because there's a mass of eggs laid on the window screen behind her. Look at this. Obviously, they haven't been fertilized by a male. I'm pretty sure that there wasn't another male lurking in my apartment somewhere. But in 24 hours or less, she released her eggs and I had no idea that this would happen. Polyphemus moths only live about a week as adults, during which time they mate, lay eggs, and may lay eggs on multiple occasions and die. Apparently, she was eager to dump these and move on. The fact that she laid eggs within 24 hours of hatching suggests to me that the pheromone that she releases in order to attract a male mate that might be miles away must be extremely powerful, and that they must work within hours of emergence from the cocoon. And if no male is to be found, the female may very likely just deposit her eggs anyway. I find a net bag and I catch her. She's very cooperative. I bring her back to the exact place where I found the cocoon back in March and set her free. She climbs a tree and settles in, and I tell her to keep pumping those pheromones, find a mate tonight, and lay more eggs. And I'll be back to look for a cocoon again next year. I've been back there in all the years since, and I've never found another cocoon. These are the tiny eggs of a green lacewing. They're hidden beneath a leaf and suspended on hair-like filaments, keeping them dry and safe from predators. Here's another cluster of lacewing eggs on milkweed flower. They look like part of the flower, aren't they pretty? And here's a green lacewing adult. That's what they look like. It came by and landed on my window one day to say hello. So to wrap up, in addition to laying eggs on their own in different places, we have seen 6 different nesting models for egg sites for a variety of insects. Some excavate tunnels in wood or soil. Some are parasites that lay eggs in the nests or in the body of other animals. Some construct nests of mud or wood. Some lay their eggs in a foam case that hardens. Some deposit their eggs in host plants that form galls, and others suspend their eggs out of reach of predatory insects on long silken threads. There are many more methods, including depositing eggs in water, which dragonflies and damselflies do. And here's a dragonfly for you. And let's face it, insects are cool. A dragonfly has between 10,000 and 30,000 individual eye lenses. We only have one, well, two, one in each eye. The individual dragonfly lenses are known as ommatidia, and they contain proteins that allow dragonflies to see ultraviolet light. Their amazing flight ability combined with this key nearly 360 vision gives dragonflies a 97% success rate when it attacks prey. And that's the highest success rate in the entire animal kingdom. So again, dragonflies are cool. This is a male blue dasher. My name is Ken Chaya. I thank you for watching, and I encourage everyone to get out there and explore and enjoy the birds and insects that can be found throughout New York City in our parks and green spaces this spring and this summer. And please do your part, whatever that might be, to support conservation of your neighborhood green spaces, because there's a lot of wild plants and creatures out there that need them and depend on them. So let's be good stewards and good neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. This was fantastic. I'll just remind everybody that Ken will be with us in the park on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. We'll do about a 1.5 hour talk and walk. And so if you can make it, you can see that you will sort of build on all of this information, and we'll discover what's in the park, and then you can take your knowledge and sort of move about the city. But the most important part that Ken is saying is that we are the stewards, and we should be very observant about our surroundings. We have about 5 minutes for any questions or comments. If anybody has anything, you can unmute yourself and ask. So if there's anyone who would like to participate, just let me know.
Well, I'm curious, if Ken, if you have any insect walks planned this summer for Central Park.
Thanks, Jill. I don't have anything officially organized at this time, but I will be sure to let you know. I am doing an insect walk and a butterfly walk at NYBG. Um, that's something that you have to pay for. But
Right.
if I have any free walks coming up in Central, I will certainly let you know. Whenever you walk with me on the Linnaean bird walks and on Tuesday mornings, I'm still looking at trees and pointing out insects. So maybe you want to come along on one of those. They're free, and all you need to do is register at linnaeannewyork.org, O-R-G. They're a lot of fun. You'll see a lot of birds too.
That's
Okay.
great.
I have two questions.
Yes, go ahead, Susie.
First, hi, Ken.
Hey, hi, Susie. I remember you.
Okay, so two questions. The first
Yeah.
one about the little bratty owl at the botanical gardens. Was he too big for the parents to bring back up to the nest?
Yeah, I don't think, there was a lot of speculation. There were a lot of, talk about rescuing it. Sometimes it's really best to just let nature alone.
Mhm.
I don't believe, the adult male owl, the female spent the nights on the nest. The male was directly across in the same pine tree that the young
Mhm.
managed to either fly to or climb into. I still would love to know how it got up there. Um, and the male would bring food to the nest. There were pellets underneath that tree all season long. So, but I don't think it would be capable of picking up the baby and carrying it back up because owls have big talons, and that baby would probably be injured in the process.
Would
So
they have continued to feed it even though it's in the pine tree?
yes,
Oh.
yes, that was something they continued to do. And although I never saw a feeding on the ledge, it was there for a full day, actually almost 2 days. Um,
Hmm.
the adults were aware of it. The mother was always looking over the ledge and saying,
Oh.
that boy, I knew he was going to be trouble. And and the father was keenly aware because he was always perched roosting during the day with a direct view of the nest and the building. So, they were monitoring the baby, but there was no rescue attempt that I was aware of on their part.
Mhm. Okay, and then my other question is about the Polyphemus moth, because you kept returning to the site. It has such a short lifespan, so does that mean
Yeah.
it has short range?
That's a really good observation. Yeah, I wouldn't say that they have much time to travel.
Mhm.
The Polyphemus moth, like a number of moths and a number of insects in general, have a much longer lifespan as a sub-adult, as a larva, as a caterpillar. By the time they reach their adult stage, many Lepidoptera don't even feed. They don't even have mouth parts. Many do, but some don't, because their lifespan is so short. It's just about reproduction,
Mhm.
laying eggs, and dying. So considering that very compressed adult stage compared to the very expanded teenage stage, if you will, or
Mhm.
larval stage, I don't think that, well, it's certainly not a migrant butterfly like a monarch or anything like that. It probably has a very limited range, which is why, unfortunately, we don't see a lot of them. And they require a specialized habitat, perhaps with very, very specialized soil and host plants, I would think. I
Mhm.
found one it was a non-native plant. It was burning bush, actually. It was, yeah, Euonymus alatus, which is not a native plant, which really surprised me.
Mhm.
But it was a huge surprise to find one in Central Park anyway. I don't know anyone who's ever found one in the park.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Nice to see you, Susie.
Well, guys, we're going to wrap this up and say thank you, Ken, and we will see you Saturday. And, we're up for this adventure. So thank you, everybody, and have a great evening.
Thank you, Alyssa, and everybody else. Hope to see you Saturday at WNYC Transmitter Park in Brooklyn.
10 a.m. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Thank you.